Hello there, people of the internet. So I've gotten a couple of requests to go ahead and explain the differences between single action and double action, what they look like, what to expect, the pros and cons between each, etc., etc. Normally this is, requested upon me by newer shooters, and that's all right. I have no problems obliging to that. If I am your go-to for information, then hey, I'll go ahead and I'll tell you what I know. I'm sure somebody out there is going to point out one thing or another that I may have missed in this video, so go ahead and check out the comments down below. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of very valuable insight from the various people that watch my YouTube channel as well. So first, we're going to start off by acknowledging that my firearm here is in fact empty for all of you safety gurus out there. Alright, now the difference between single action and double action, basically it's in the name, whether or not you're performing one single action or two actions whenever you pull the trigger on any sort of firearm. But for this particular case, we're going to talk about a semi-automatic handgun. I'm choosing my Walther P38 because I have an external hammer on this firearm, and it is the easiest for me to show the differences between single action and double action. So single action, the hammer is already cocked by some outside force, whether or not it is the slide itself cycling backwards to cock the hammer, upon firing, whether or not you reach up and physically cock the hammer yourself. As you can see, the trigger will actually be pulled backwards during a single action cocking. See how the trigger has gone back? This right here is a very clear indication of a single action handgun. Whenever you have a frontward trigger being pulled to the rear, once the hammer is cocked, there, like I said, is a very clear indication of single action. The reason that people prefer single action over double action is maybe they want to use whatever gun it is that they're using for target shooting. Whenever you have a single action trigger, the only thing that trigger's doing whenever you pull the trigger is it's dropping the hammer. One single action. The hammer is dropping, and that is setting off the firing pin. Well, that's hitting the firing pin, setting off the round once the tip of the firing pin hits the primer. Whenever you pull the trigger, all that happens, hammer drops, just like that. Now on a double action system, you actually have to pull the trigger itself back in order to cock the hammer. As I pull the trigger back, you'll see the hammer physically begin to cock itself. This right here is a much heavier, much more stiff trigger pull because you're fighting not only the trigger spring as well, but the hammer spring as well. This is more so done as a safety precaution. Let's say you have yourself a concealed carry handgun or something like that inside of your pocket. You want the trigger to not be a hair trigger. You don't want like the slightest bump or nick or bang or something to cause that trigger to be pulled and for your gun to go off. Single action is good for target shooting because that light trigger squeeze means that you're not going to have a lot of play in terms of like anyone who's ever shot a handgun. As you squeeze that trigger, your sights are going to move a little bit, especially if you have a real hard trigger, like a trigger that is difficult to pull. I'm trying to explain this in terminology that most people who don't necessarily understand a lot about firearms can still understand. A trigger that is more difficult to pull is going to make your sights shake more than a trigger that is nice and easy to pull. But a trigger that's nice and easy to pull is more dangerous to have, in your pocket if you're concealed carrying, or on your hip, on your holster, whatever the situation may be. So it all depends on the application of what it is that you're wanting to, actually utilize the handgun for. There's no real difference in speed depending on the platform. I will say that some actions are single fire or single action only, and some platforms are double action only. In this particular case, this platform happens to be both. Whatever my preference is, I can go ahead and run it like that. If I feel like running double action for whatever reason, I can go ahead and pull the trigger until that drops. Whenever the slide cycles, it's automatically going to set this thing into a single action mode. There's a decocker on the side of the gun, that is the safety. I can manually decock this thing. Whenever I decock it, the hammer falls, but the gun does not fire. And then I can set it back to fire, and I'd have another double action capable trigger squeeze. I don't know why I'd ever want to do this, but I at least have that option. Most of the time, I definitely, absolutely 100% prefer having a single action trigger squeeze, just because it is so much easier to squeeze that trigger without moving the handgun around. Now, although this allows me to do either or, like I had said, not all of your firearms out there allow you to do that. This is my Star Model BM. This is a single action only handgun, despite being, you know, semi-automatic. A lot of times your semi-automatics, they are both single action and double action, especially your more modern ones, but this right here is based off of a design that is a single action only. The same design with modern touches and whatnot. There's a lot of these out there that are double action as well, but for all intents and purposes, this particular one is single action. And I will show that hammer is dropped. Whenever I squeeze the trigger, the hammer does not move and nothing happens. In order to fire the handgun, let me go ahead and show that this handgun is in fact clear for all of you safety gurus out there. Whenever you want to fire the handgun, you cannot just squeeze the trigger because the hammer does not move. You'll either have to manually cock the hammer if you already have a round in the chamber, or manually rack the slide, which will automatically cock the hammer. And that is whenever you can pull the trigger, fire your round, and as the slide cycles with each round fired, it automatically cocks the hammer, making single action viable for this thing. It's not like the old Western revolvers where you have to manually cock the hammer every time you fire. On revolver, there's nothing cycling back and forth to cock the hammer for you. That's why you have to, you know, use your thumb and manually do it yourself. On these right here, you don't have to do it. The slide cycles back and forth just like this every time you pull that trigger and fire. Unless you're on ammo, then it'll lock itself back on an empty magazine. That's when if you drop your mag, grab a new one, load it in there, slide catch, you know, and you keep going to town. Now, there are some double action only handguns out there. These are specifically like CCW handguns that you are expecting to carry on person, that you want a nice tough trigger squeeze, so you don't risk accidentally pulling the trigger if you are holstering it, having it in your pocket, you know, doing something with it, moving around with it on your side. You don't want that trigger going off. That's how you get a round in the leg. And you don't want to accidentally shoot yourself. That would definitely be a bad day for everybody. So on guns like this that are only double action, 9 times out of 10 your concealed carry handguns are either not going to have any sort of hammer on them, they're going to be a covered hammer, or they're going to have a hammer that doesn't have a spur on it. On several occasions I've ran handguns that have a visible hammer so you can see it being pulled back, but they don't have a spur so you can't physically cock it back. Every time you fire, that hammer drops back to its original position, and you have to pull that trigger again to pull the hammer back, just like this, each and every time. There's no spur to be able to grab onto it. There's no single action that's going to hold the hammer back in place whenever the slide cycles. Every single shot is going to be double action on handguns like that. They're definitely safer handguns, don't get me wrong. They're definitely safer handguns, but the trigger is a lot heavier. And while you're squeezing that trigger, you're going to be moving your firearm around quite a bit more than you would with just a simple, lightweight trigger squeeze. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Hopefully this helped somebody out there today. I imagine it will, because I get asked this all the time, and now I have a video that I can just refer them to. Like the video if you actually like the video. Description down below has a link to all sorts of different things. Go ahead and go check that out. That being said, hey, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm running out of daylight, but I feel like shooting some more. I have a bunch of rifles here that I have to pick up though. I've been filming all day, and I'm trying to make as many videos as I can, you know, in one day, because I don't always get the chance to come out to the range. So I'm gonna go ahead and run these handguns, get some B-roll footage, and we'll see where we go from there. Thanks for watching, guys. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm looking over here because this 4x4 I have here for some reason is covered in ants. Don't know, but it's covered in ants. Alright, you guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.
while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.